Hi, I'm Captain Mike. In my last video, which was about Faience, I kind of bumbled around a little bit and tried to show you how I accomplished that little task. I kind of alluded to the idea that I might try some colors in this Faience recipe. And here's what I come up with. Put my coffee down. Everything is on the blue theme so far. These two here, this one is copper carbonate, and this one is cobalt carbonate, or anyway, that's close to what they're called. And they were done in the kiln. And these two are actually copper carbonate. This one was just fired to a different temperature and used just kind of a metallic look. And this one was done in a microwave kiln. But they're all blue. So we're going to try to improve on that. I've got some different types of colorant that I'm going to experiment with. And let me show you where I'm starting with that. Hope y'all have had y'all's coffee this morning. Let's get on with it. Before we get to the good stuff, we'll do a little math. I showed you basically this in the earlier video, but I broke it on down to ounces and grams and percentages so that you can have a starting point. This is by no means the only recipe for doing this, but for my experiment and to try to keep things as scientific as I can, I used this. It's a 4-ounce batch because the pieces that I was casting came out to exactly 1 ounce, so I could break it, a 4-ounce batch, down into 4 pieces. So I'll put this down in the directions below at the end of this video. So let me show you what we have here. Now, these pieces right here, and I do apologize for the nasty looking plaster bats, but I use these things for everything, and they also help this stuff dry out. But these pieces are used same recipe but more colorant. This is copper carbonate, these 3 pieces, and this one here is a piece using some of the I forget exactly what you call it. It might be the Victoria. I'm not sure. No, it's not Victoria. But anyway, it's one of the colors. So you see how kind of furry these have gotten? These have been sitting out here for a little longer. And I mentioned again in the other video that you need to have this white looking efflorescence or whatever present on your pieces before you fire them. That's going to give you the glaze. Now, with that said, we come over here to these, and these were all, part of them were uncast last night, part of them were, these 3 were uncast this morning. I take the mix, I put it in the mold, and I use plastic molds, a regular plastic mold for these. Let me get it. I use this plastic mold for these here. A word about plastic molds right now. These are not designed for what I'm doing. To get this out after it's frozen, you're going to have to flex them. Flexing eventually will wear these out and they'll break right along the cast line. And you just have a little piece of plastic. Now they'll still work, but it's going to mess your whole thing up. So just be aware of that. Don't be upset when your mold cracks, because that's not what these are designed for. It's what I use them for. Now, another word about the freezing. I put the mixture in this, and it's somewhere between pourable, not quite pourable really, and dough. I can still use my hands and push it around, but it makes it a lot easier to cast. Then I put this in the freezer and freeze these things. And once they're froze, they pop out very easily. They also defrost very quickly And then in about a day, they'll start to develop this fuzz. And it takes 3 or 4 days to get to this point. You want these to be perfectly dry. Do not get in a hurry. If you do, you put them in your kiln, they're going to blow up. The water or air inside of any kind of a casting will make it blow up. Now, I used 7 different types of colorant here. And the only one that I didn't do was this one right here, and I'll compare it. It's just got a little bit more colorant in it. But these, I went with 1% of colorant to the total of the weight that 4 ounces are same in grams. And I kept that constant. So we have, these are all, by the way, are Mason stains designed for ceramics, but I figured they'd work for this. This is somewhere between ceramics and glass. Hard to tell what you really want to call it. But I went with Mason stains, and this is called Victoria. This is a dark turquoise, a sunshine yellow, a copper carbonate with a lot less copper carbonate than I normally use. Same with a cobalt carbonate. There is no color in this one. This is going to be my balanced piece, you might say. And I don't know how you pronounce that. Rutile, whatever. I think it's a brown. We'll see. And red oxide, which was just some red plain oxide that I had that I mix in everything from ceramics to plaster to concrete, whatever. We're going to see how that does. So this is what we have. I'm going to put these in the kiln, and I am going to fire them. Once they're dry, I'm going to fire them to cone 06. And then we're just going to see. These right here, I'm going to experiment with these in the microwave kiln. So that'll be a bonus. I'll come back and show you what they look like. All of them, but this one, that one won't go in my microwave kiln. I removed these from the kiln this morning, and was actually quite pleased with the results of the different colorants that I used and how they turned out. If you'll remember, this is the recipe that I used for these, and the colorant was a very, very small amount of colorant for the mixture, less than 4/10 of a ounce, or 1.13 grains of colorant, or grams of colorants, excuse me, mixed in with. Kind of go over what colorants I used. And I'm sorry if you hear a bunch of wind chimes going in the background. We've got a little windstorm coming up here this morning, and it's pleasant in one way, but it might be distracting in another. So kind of bear with me. This color here, by the way, these are 3 here are Mason stains designed for ceramics, and I just mixed it into the Faience mixture. This one is called Victoria. I'll write the numbers all down. I won't go through all the numbers, but if you want the numbers, they'll be at the bottom of the, I'll include them on the screen. But this one is Victoria, and it's a green. This one is called Dark Turquoise, and it is kind of a nice light blue. This is Sunshine Yellow. Now, this one is copper, copper, I got it all mixed up here. That is Cobalt Carbonate. It's the darkest blue. And this one is Copper Carbonate. And this one is Red Oxide. Now, it's odd, it come out kind of brown, but it was just an oxide that I have that I use for pretty much everything here, mixing with concrete. It's just a colorant. I don't know what it is actually made from, but it did turn it this nice shade of brown. I don't know how to pronounce this correctly. It's Rutile or Rutile, but I think it's more like Rutile. It's a nice tan, and this one has no color added whatsoever. This is just all the ingredients that I added together and mixed up with no colorant, and it's kind of a very, very light gray brown. and this one is coral red, which is another mason stain. This one, of course, is the copper carbonate, and as is this one. And I just put them in the kiln to fire them and see how they would come out. Now, this is interesting. This one here is copper carbonate fired in the kiln. Now, this is what happened. I fired it at about, let's say 12 minutes at 3-minute increments. And this is what it done. It had turned cherry red, and I thought it was fine, and it looked like that, as did this one. So I took this one, it looked just like this, and I put it in the kiln and fired it to cone 06 with all the hold times and all as is required for a cone 06 glaze schedule, and it went from this to this. So this shows that it's not hot enough in the kiln at 12 minutes. I'm going to put it back in the kiln and refire it again, and we're going to see if the microwave kiln will smooth out. But that's what I got in the microwave kiln. Now, I have had successful firings in the microwave kiln, as I showed you earlier, but I fired them for a little longer, I believe. But a lot of times in the microwave kiln, the times vary, a lot of things vary. I tried to keep this experiment here a little bit more consistent so that the results would be consistent. But this is what we get with the colorants. You can add colorants, especially mason stains, to your faience recipes, whether it's my recipe. I say my recipe, it's not my recipe, it's one I got offline. I might have tweaked it a little, but you're going to tweak it also. So you can add colorants to this or to yours. And this is a big experiment, and I hope it's an experiment and one of lots of joy and pleasure to you. Hopefully I have taken some of the hard work out of it, and you won't have to throw away a lot of stuff. Maybe you will, but that's how I did it. Now, a couple of real quick things that I did. I was not sure how the faience was going to, especially this one right here, and it did slope a little bit. I'd put another little ceramic holder under it so it wouldn't bend. I was afraid it would do that, but I was also afraid that it might do that on these smaller ones. But it didn't. They did fine. So if you've got, and this one did fine. So if you have something long like this that you want to do, support it properly with these little ceramic things, and that'll keep them off of the shelf. You can see this one splattered a little bit. I don't know why it splattered a little bit. This is some strange stuff because, again, I will say, the only difference in this faience is the fact that it's a one-step process. You don't have to make a clay object, fire it, then come back and glaze it with 2, 3, 4 coats, or dip it in your glaze, however you want to do. Wait for it to dry and then put it in the kiln and fire it again. That's the only advantage to this. Detail degrades somewhat, but it's because of the process of what it is. And this detail is totally acceptable. We'll see about this one when I do it. It's just a phoenix, and or whatever they call the bird in Egyptian lore. But yeah, let me go zap this thing real quick for, I'll either ruin it, I'll come back with it, and we'll add that, and then we'll conclude this video. Okay, this one just came out of the microwave and is cooled enough to handle. The first 6 minutes in, it cracked. Don't know why, but that happens sometimes. However, as you can tell, it did smooth out. A little different coloration here, but all in all, it turned out pretty nice in the microwave. I think this was a total of 21 minutes. So that black bumpy stuff that did appear on this the first time I microwaved it did come from insufficient heating. My best tests tell me that the microwave will only get up to about 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. It may get a little hotter, yours may do better. But that seems to be the target temperature for the microwave. But it is doable. And if you remember, this was the first one that I done in the microwave. So, you know, yeah, you can get some results that way. Now, as I mentioned, these were all molded in these Milky Way molds here. And by a lot of people sell them besides Milky Way, but you get on eBay or get on Craigslist, not Craigslist, Amazon, and you can find all the molds that you want. You can use these. It's best if you use these, or even if you use the silicone molds, to let the stuff freeze. Now, the last thing that I'll say is it is possible you don't have to mold this stuff. One of the prettiest pieces that I have seen of faience is a hippopotamus. And if you do any research on the web, you'll see that hippopotamus. So it was molded by hand. So you can do that. So, you know, whether you mold it in a plastic or a silicone mold, or whether you do a freehand mold, let it dry really well, let it effervesce a little bit, that white stuff, and this is what you're going to get. Now, I may do one more video duplicating this right here and putting it in my glass kiln, which will only fire to 1700 degrees. We're going to see what that does. I'll do a very short video on that. I'm not going to include it in this one, but if it's anywhere close to being something I think that might go along with this, it'll just be a series of 3. And then those of you who just have a glass kiln can, of course, accomplish this. We'll see how that turns out. Okay, I'm Captain Mike. That's my video on coloring faience. If I said that correctly, I appreciate y'all watching. If you like these videos, please subscribe to my channel, hit like, and I thank you again for watching. I'm Captain Mike, and I'm out of here.